Always fun to talk Flyers hockey, and that's especially the case when it's with a guy who's played the game. And we happen to have one with us, a guy who did that very well for 7 years in Philadelphia. These days, he's president of the Flyers Alumni Association Executive Board. We say hello to Brad Marsh. Hey, Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Chet?
Very good, thank you. Brad, first thing, no offense to the other great ex-athletes out there, but hockey guys are the best. You know, I've met a slew of Flyers over the years, and we've had several of them on our show: Bob Kelly, Bernie Perrant, Joe Watson, Brian Propp, Chris Therien, all super guys. And there's so many of you guys also who decide to stick around and live in the Philly, South Jersey area. Why is that?
Well, I think if you talk to the guys that you just mentioned, our wives are from here. But anyhow, no, Philly's a great place to live. It's a great hockey atmosphere, as everyone knows. And whether you live on the PA side of the river or the Jersey side of the river, they're great communities in which to raise a family. It's great. And, you mentioned the alumni guys, and no other sport does what the NHL hockey alumni do. There's 32, actually 34, because the Quebec Nordiques and the Hartford Whalers still have alumni chapters. And each of those alumni chapters are making a difference in the community in which they live. It's great. And we just love getting out there and making a difference and putting smiles on people's faces. And the Flyers alumni do it as good as any other alumni.
And thanks in part to what Ed Snyder, Keith Allen and company put in motion right from the get-go in 1967. The Flyers have always had a real good reputation around the league, and the first cup-winning team from 1973-74 is getting lots of attention these days. It's 50 years, believe it or not. They were honored in November by the Philly Sports Hall of Fame, and then just last week by the Philadelphia Sports Writers Association. And in a few days, several of those Broad Street Bully-era guys will be on the scene for Flyers Alumni Weekend. What all is happening this weekend, Friday, Saturday?
Well, it's going to be a great weekend, and we're going to start it off with our Hall of Fame induction. I shouldn't say start it off. I'm going to start at the end and then work backwards to the good stuff. On the 27th, Mark Recchi is being inducted into the Flyers Hall of Fame. Very well deserving to be inducted. This guy was a scoring machine. He was a great Flyer. He went on to a great career with other teams as well. He's a great coach. So Rex is going to be inducted on Saturday. The Flyers are playing the Bruins, so it's going to be a great game. And so many of us will be on hand to cheer him on and wish him well with his induction. On Friday, the 26th, the Flyers alumni, led by Mark Recchi, the newest inductee, will be playing the Bruins alumni in an alumni game, 7 o'clock at the Wells Fargo Center. It's going to be a great event. The alumni games are so much fun. They start out fun. Everybody's happy to see each other. And then as the game goes on, the temperature starts to heat up a little bit and the competition juices kick back in. And so it usually makes for a very entertaining game. We're a little slower than what we used to be, but the competitiveness is still there. We have some great alumni playing in that game. But part and parcel with this whole Hall of Fame weekend is, as you mentioned, it's 50 years since the Flyers won the first Stanley Cup. We beat the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are the common thread here. So we're bringing all of the Stanley Cup guys back from 74 and 75 when they beat the Sabres to celebrate on this Hall of Fame weekend. And so they'll all be in the building. Thursday night, we got a nice alumni-only reception where we'll rekindle all of our old stories through the various decades of Flyers hockey. And the Stanley Cup will be in the building. We've got an unbelievable tribute to the Stanley Cup guys prior to the alumni game on Friday. So it's going to be a lots of fun with lots of stuff going on. And what's really cool, there's something for every Flyer fan, regardless of what decade you cheered for. There's something for everyone to come and get excited about and be really pumped about.
We talked to Brian Propp recently. He confirmed that he and Chris Terrian have been added to the roster for the alumni game. I know 80-year-old Joe Watson is going to put the skates on and give it a go again. Love Joe. Who else is going to play for the Flyers on Friday night?
Well, before we go on, Joe, he's the only Flyer that has played in every decade. 60s, 70s, 80s, and obviously he retired, but he's played in the alumni, still a staple back on the blue line. He treats every alumni game like it's the Stanley Cup semifinal, Stanley Cup final, regardless. And it's always fun when we get a new alumni in the lineup. That's his first game as an alumni. And Joe chews him out for not back checking. Joe chews him out for not picking up a check or missing a pass. It's great. It's hilarious to be in the room when Joe's chewing out guys. But so on the blue line, we got Mark Howe's playing, Hall of Famer Mark Howe, best defenseman ever to play for the Flyers, in my opinion. Of course, he was my teammate there in the 80s, and Joe Watson. On the forward lines, we've got, of course, Eric Lindros and Johnny Leclerc playing. Mark Recchi's playing, as I mentioned before, but we got Patrick Sharp playing in his first alumni game. Mike Richards making his first trip back to Philadelphia to put on the orange and black again. And, the list goes on and on and on, and it's great. Brian Boucher is anchoring the nets. We had a little scare on the weekend. Robert Esch pulled his hamstring getting ready for the alumni game.
Oh, no.
So we replaced him with Michael Layton, which is kind of cool because him and Bush were teammates and helped backstop the Flyers that exciting 2010 playoff run. It's going to be a great time. And as I said, doesn't matter what time or when you were a Flyer fan or when you became a Flyer fan, there's Flyers from every decade playing in the alumni game.
By the way, you mentioned Mark Recchi. He's in the Flyers all-time top 10 in points, assists, and game-winning goals. You didn't play with him, but you did play against him for a couple of years late in your career, early in his career. One memory I have of Recchi is him scoring that game winner for the Flyers in a triple overtime playoff game against the Maple Leafs. I think that was in the early 2000s. So great to see him being honored. He's already in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That's just a great thing for Rex this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And, I mentioned a little scare that we had with Robert Esch, but if you turn the clock back to the start of the season, obviously the whole Hall of Fame planning, it happens many, many months before the actual induction date. And so, we start with the nominating committee, and then we go into the voting committee. And, and then we notify the person or persons that are going in. So we did all that and had the nice call with Mark and, Keith Jones and Dan Hilferty welcomed him and congratulated him. And then the next week he gets named coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Holy moly, did I have a little minor heart attack then. But anyhow, I called Rex up right away and said, look, we understand. Because they're actually on the West Coast right now. And Rex says, no, it's all good. When they reached me about becoming an assistant coach, I negotiated it in. So I'm all good. So he's actually taking a red-eye flight from Calgary to Toronto on Thursday evening. He'll get in here 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock on Friday morning. He'll get right over to the Wells Fargo Center for our morning skate and team pitcher, and then he'll have an afternoon nap if there's time because he's the main guy. He might have to do some interviews with the media, et cetera, et cetera. But he'll be here for the Friday night game and, of course, here for Saturday, his induction. But so it was a couple of nervous moments way back in September when we were putting the final touches to this weekend together.
Hey, let's talk a bit about you, Brad. For people who don't know, you grew up in London, Ontario, and before getting traded to the Flyers in 1981, you played with the Flames, not just Calgary, but the Atlanta Flames. You were drafted 11th overall in 1978, began your career, with the Atlanta Flames. What was it like playing in Atlanta the first couple of years of your NHL career?
It was an adjustment, especially back then. You were 20 years old when that was a 20-year-old draft. And as a Canadian kid who's used to playing hockey outdoors and lots of snow on the ground, it was a big adjustment to go to the sunny South. We had a great fan base there, very enthusiastic. They didn't understand the game, but They came to the game and they cheered and they made a lot of noise. And in 1980, the team was sold to Calgary just because of the economics at the time. I mentioned there was a lot of great fans in Atlanta, but there wasn't a lot of great businesses that backed the Flames back then. And so off to Calgary we went, and it was very neat and very special to be back on into the hockey climate, if you will. And we thrived that first year in Calgary, and actually we beat the Flyers in 7 games in the second round of the playoffs. And I must say I had a very good round, a very good playoff, especially a good playoff against the Flyers. And one of my assignments was to play against the Holmgren, Mr. Paul Holmgren, all the time. What a tough son of a gun he was to play against. But anyhow, you never know how things work out. The following year in Calgary, we had a lot of defensemen, and we had a number of our center icemen got injured for whatever reason. And in Philadelphia, they had the exact opposite happen.
Yeah.
They had a number of centermen, and Bob Daly, for the longtime Flyer fans, he had that career-ending ankle injury, went into the boards and just shattered his ankle. So they needed a defenseman, and Keith Allen, the general manager at the time, remembered back to the playoffs, and he told me this after the fact, that I had such a strong playoff against the Flyers. I was on top of their list to inquire about. And so the trade was made. I was captain of the Calgary Flames, and the trade was made for Mel Bridgman, who was captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. It's one of the few times in the history of all sports that a captain for captain trade was made. And so I became a Flyer in November of '81, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was a big difference and a huge learning curve for me to walk into the Flyers dressing room with a Bobby Clark and a Bill Barber, and the leadership in that dressing room. Even though I was the captain previously, the leadership in the room really had a huge impact on me, and really shaped the rest of my career.
Hey, you weren't considered a huge fighter, but you did drop the gloves every once in a while. And this was a pretty good one. You and the Canucks' Garth Butcher.
Vancouver's frustrated. As they're down 7-1. Who's that, Sandy? Butcher's got his arm loose, so he's grabbed Marsh. Butcher's hitting him on the helmet. Now Brad's got his helmet off. Mr. Butcher picked on the wrong guy. Oh, he got a good uppercut there. It's come right underneath, clean as can be. There goes Butcher. He's down. Brad Marsh on top of him. Now things are warming up with Dougie Croswell.
We love watching those old videos, man.
Yeah, well, yep. Gene Hart and Bobby Taylor doing the commentator, and it's great to hear the Flyer fans cheering and roaring. And I didn't fight. I fought a lot in junior. I fought a lot in my first couple of years. Actually, my first NHL fight was against Mel Bridgman in the Philadelphia Flyers, and
you scored your first NHL goal against the Flyers too, beating Phil Meir.
That's correct. My first fight was against Mel Bridgman and the Flyers, and my first goal was against the Flyers and Phil Meir. And actually, we beat him pretty good there that year, '79, and I think it was 7-3 or something. And the next game, the Flyers won, and that started their 35-game unbeaten streak. So I guess we embarrassed them enough, and they got mad, and they said, okay, we got to do something about it. But it's funny. I was with Phil Meir somewhere at an event here in Philly, and I pointed out that I scored my first NHL goal against Phil. He was mad. And, oh, you did it. No, you didn't. So actually, our alumni, we on our website, one of our tabs is Flyers history, and we have every game sheet of every Flyers game listed. I looked it up, and I found the game. I found the game in October of 1979, and I printed out the game sheet and I mailed it to him. This was before I knew how to figure out how to scan something and email it to him. So anyway, I mailed it to him, and he was so mad because I had the proof that I scored on him. It was pretty good.
And by the way, let's talk about that head of hair you had back in the early days, man. Good head of hair.
Yeah, I had big hair back in the day, and I tell my grandkids that I don't have any hair now because I skated so fast, which we all know is not true, but my grandkids believe me, so it's great.
Still a good-looking guy, though. Hey, running out of time, I wanted to get your take on this year's Flyers. Rough weekend. They lost back-to-back games, but they had won 5 in a row right before that, and they're certainly exceeding expectations, I think, of most fans. What's your take on this year's Flyers?
3 letters, 1 word. Wow. Like it's hard to imagine based on, when we made all the changes in the summertime and then through camp, Torts and Danny and Jonesy were all saying patient, we're rebuilding. And boy, have they taken the hockey world by surprise, and they've taken the Philly sports fans by surprise. And I think Flyer hockey is back. The correct Flyer hockey is back, where teams don't want to play at the Wells Fargo Center now because they know they're in for a hardworking night. They know they're in for a battle. So it's great to see. So whatever becomes of the rest of the season, I'm not going to make any predictions. Well, we'll do this, we'll do this. Flyer hockey is back, and the road to respectability for the Philadelphia Flyers is back, and it's great to see. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and for those longtime Flyer fans, if you remember back to 84, 85, Mike Keenan's first year, we had a very young team, inexperienced team. We had 7 guys under the age of 21, the Sutter brothers, Rich and Ron, Murray Craven, Rick Tocchet, Derek Smith. The list goes on, and no one picked us to finish in the playoffs. And not only did we finish in the playoffs, we won the President's Trophy. We went to the Stanley Cup final, and we lost in 5 games to the mighty Edmonton Oilers. But this team reminds me of that 84 team. They're young, they're exciting, great goaltending, real good defense, and some real good talented forwards. And so good things are in store for us.
I agree. And again, Flyers Alumni Weekend coming up in just a few days. Tickets are still available. I think they start as low as $25. So check it out. Flyers Bruins Alumni Game this Friday evening. Brad Marsh, this has been a blast. Thanks so much for visiting Philly Pressbox Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to Friday night. It's going to be a lot of fun.